I'll wait and I'll see if, I'll wait for a couple more people to come on. Today is the 22nd. So it's a twin flame gateway. Hi, Amy. Oh, gosh. That reminds me. Hang one second. I'm going to put this one down there. That reminds me because after you and I spoke before, I was going to talk about, friends and family. Hi, everybody. So I'm not sure how I'm going to, I have an idea. This might be kind of a shorter live stream. I just saw 111. And I'm going to wind up doing more tomorrow, possibly tonight. It depends on Calico because Calico's sick right now. She just called me and she said she's running a fever at her grandma's house. So I'm going to go pick her up. But I told her, Anyway, I said I'm going to finish my live stream first and then go pick her up afterwards because otherwise she'll just be here. Okay. But I don't think it's going to be a very, very long one. Nonetheless, I've got all kinds of things to say. And we're at such a critical juncture. I feel like I always say that because it's been a critical juncture for a lot of us for a really long time. We just kind of like this endless critical juncture after critical juncture. I say that to Calico, and she said, "You always tell me it's some kind of really big wave, but then nothing happens. Just kind of, we keep going. Chop wood, carry water." But it really is, there are a couple of things now that are, it's like the rubber band has snapped. That's really what it's like now, or we're on the precipice. We're right at this threshold. And because you can't pull on just one end of a rubber band, and I'm always talking about polarities that work together, and there's only so far you can pull it before it snaps. And I've been watching this for a long time in it, more than watching. So I made this trusty diagram. So you know how I'm always talking about the 3-to-1 ratio? Any place you find a 3 and a 1 next to each other, it's a catalyst for change, and you get to determine the direction it's headed right at that juncture. So the reason I wanted to make sure that I did this live stream today is because it's my 31st live stream. So there's a 3 and a 1. And then if I postponed it, even though I wanted to, because I wanted to go get my daughter, but if I postpone it, it won't happen on the 22nd. The 22nd is the balance that we're looking for. We're looking for a 2 and a 2. So I figured if I'm doing my live stream, it's my determination after considering all these factors that I'm taking it back to in a direction. So I decided to do it on the 22nd as opposed to waiting for tomorrow. Although tomorrow will be a change, but at least I'm taking it in the right direction. So regarding the 3-to-1 ratio, I am going to still keep talking about this energetic construct because the energetic construct is going through a refresher. Basically, it's a do-over. If any of you have been following, first of all, if you're not familiar with my live streams, they're long, they're rambly, they're not always linear. I would strongly suggest going back and catching up on the previous information, because I can't just reiterate it every time, even though I do some of that anyway. I was trying to figure out a way to explain explain the 3-to-1 ratio and why it was so important. In the, oh, where are we? In the energetic construct, there it is. In the energetic construct that we came down in the Joan of Arc lifetime, we came down with a team of people at that time that half were dark and half were light, or we made alliances with parties that we knew weren't really it served a purpose, because the purpose at that time was to go into the 100 Years' War and use that energy to separate the wheat from the chaff. When we're dealing with such a compressed planet to begin with, as this was, we had to get in there with movement, because they had worked themselves into a situation that was so compressed and so dense that literally no light or movement could get in. So there was just consequently no evolution at all. There was no development. So our first job that began the King David lifetime, and then it went to the Queen Esther lifetime. We've been working throughout history. The Joan of Arc lifetime, we went down with a team of people, because the team changes every single time. On each one of these points, there are, and this is a Merkaba, 2-dimensional illustration of a 3-dimensional model, just for the purpose of illustration. But as I've said, each point of the triangle, which represents more or less an issue or a point of view, more like a group, kind of a small group of issues, a particular energy stream, or something that needed to be rebalanced. And it was held by 2 individuals who were the primary rebalancers of that, whatever that issue is. So let's say that one triangle at the bottom is basically issues surrounding finances, and one would be issues surrounding politics, and one would be the issues of like the sexes or social interaction, things like that. Countries were heavily invested then too. We had to divide it first so that we can get rid of the darkest, who aren't coming, they're not interested in being in transmuting, and they're being kicked out. That's where we are now. So we had to basically clear out everyone who was committed to non-development, committed to staying in kindergarten, or simply couldn't master the skill sets in time. There are actually a lot of kind of well-intentioned people, not necessarily bad, but more committed, or committed to laziness, or just underdeveloped, just basically underdeveloped. So we have to leave them behind, because they're not ready. It's not a matter of being mean or deciding that you're going to cast somebody out. It has absolutely nothing to do with malevolence or retaliation or revenge, like you're bad. That's not it. It's basically that in the 5th dimension, you are responsible for being a wise steward of others beneath you in vibration. And part of being a wise steward is knowing how to share, knowing how to be in service to others. And if you can't do that, if you don't, there's a standard. It requires a particular skill set. And if you don't have it by now, you still need to go to a 3rd-dimensional lesson planet where that is still being taught. So that's where those people are going. Most of us are losing family members, and often it's family members that we loved. We really hoped they wanted to come. I lost a lot of family members. The majority of my family members made the decision not to rise. They're really committed to a 3rd-dimensional vantage point, and there's heartbreak that goes along with that. It still has to happen. You have to recognize that it's not doing you a disservice. It's not doing you any service to stay behind once you have helped as much as possible. So I was going to talk about this. There's the 3-to-1 ratio. On this, every every point was held by two people, and there was a 3-to-1 imbalance. So basically, one person would have, here's the middle. One person would basically have 1/3 of the job the other person did. There was an imbalance of power. And then the job was to correct it and bring it back to balance. That was supposed to happen already in this lifetime, hasn't happened. We had a do-over that started about 6 years ago, and we were unable to get out of it. Instead of having it go the appropriate direction, which would have brought us back to a state of balance, which is 2 on either side. Anytime you have a 4, it locks you into a structure. A structure is a 4 brings you to a square in geometry, right? Because there are 4 points, and it's very stable. So it will lock you into, a 4 represents stability. So you can have a 4 model. For example, if you look in this triangle, you're trying to go from we were trying to go from a 3-to-1 ratio to a 2-2. A 2-2 will bring you balance on either side, because 2 is for partnership. So if you have a partnership and it's equal on both sides, it takes you to a 2-2. What happened instead is that we went even further into imbalance, which maybe we can get that to serve. I'll talk about that in a second. There was a faster way to do it, and then there's a slower way to do it. The slower way to do it is we can still achieve our aim. It's going to wind up taking us farther, but there's a lot more hardship involved. Didn't have to be that hard. Didn't have to be that hard. At any rate, we started out with a 3-to-1. It's really not a 3-to-1 ratio. I keep calling it that because I'm talking about a 3 and a 1. Anyway, once you get to, so from this model, it could go one of 2 directions. If it goes in this direction, it takes you to a tower moment. For those of you who don't know what that is, a tower moment is basically when you've ignored something for too long, and spirit has been trying to nudge you in a particular direction, and you ignore it, and you think you can have things your own way, or spirit is just getting it's as far as it can go. When something has gone as far as it can go and you've ignored spirit for too long, it takes you to this kind of a ratio where the structure, it basically brings you to an imbalance of self-service. So you're still at a 4, but the 4 is all held by one person. So it's basically an imbalance of power taken to its extreme, and this will bring you to a tower moment. So what it basically gets you is something that's either, one of 2 things are going to happen when you get to this moment. Either you're going to go into something that's more like cell division. So it's like these 4 will make their own square, and these 4 will make their own square, and then you're going to have 2 separate things because they haven't mixed. They haven't balanced. They're not working cooperatively. So it's basically the 2 sides. It's like you get a divorce, or you get something like, that's it, I quit, and you'll have that. And basically, that is what we have on this planet right now. We've got one side that's very separate from the other, like the 5D planet is having a very different experience than the 3D planet. And the 3D is basically being kicked out, and we're not going to even have that anymore. This is what happens when it's mixed. When it's mixed, there is still an imbalance of power. And here is where you can linger here for a really, really long time, because basically you shouldn't. You should rebalance it. If you're smart, you're going to rebalance it as quickly as possible. And that would be where the people that have the power make sure that they are responsible and they do the right thing. And this would be like, for example, white men giving back all the rights to like indigenous people and paying women equally. And that tends to be a difficult, you get a lot of growth from this ratio. But what happens, for example, if we say that this is women who have typically had less power, and this is men, what the masculine side who has the power should be doing with the appropriate use of the power is to give it to this side. Those who have less power also need to fight for it more. They need to claim it. But since they have less to work with, they are almost always taken advantage of. I'm not saying it has to happen, but that's what has happened. They're almost always taken advantage of by this column, who have usually been conditioned to believe that being the biggest and strongest means you win and you're better. And rather than taking advantage of their position of strength and protecting the weaker party, which is the thing that they're here to learn to do, usually, like in the political system, it's very difficult to get it to change. They're going to try to get from their strategy. What they usually try to do is maintain this as long as possible, because as a fear farm, this breeds a lot of hostility, because this side usually tends to think, well, we can fight and we can get our rights back. So it's not really the quickest way to go. It's important to fight for your rights, but there comes a point where you've done everything you can do, and another move that this side could make is just to drop it and bring about a tower moment for this side as quickly as possible. You can strategically say, you know what, fuck it, I'm not going to invest any of my energy. The only resource you have at this point, since you're not going to give me equality, I'm going to use my power to say, you know what, I'm not even going to play your game. I'm out. And if you drop it and release it, it's going to take them to a tower moment almost instantly. That's actually a fairly decent strategy. And that's the pivot point where we're at now. And you don't want to abuse that. And it's so funny because usually this side they're usually the more responsible ones. They're usually the wiser steward, like the indigenous populations, and those who don't bring about a tower moment for others because they're so responsible. They don't want to destroy something unless they know they've done absolutely everything they could possibly do to get things to go correctly. After a while, it's time for a reset. And that's really where we are now, because, yeah, I'm not even going to go into why, but we're really at this point now where it's like, you've had enough time to develop. We've given you the 10 commandments. We were down there with you to tell you what the answers were. We gave you the 11th commandment, which, also there's common sense and human decency, and we shouldn't have to constantly tell people what the right thing to do is. At some point, you need to figure it out. And if you still haven't figured out certain things, you're gonna live in the world that you said was okay. And that's basically where it takes us to now. So a balanced state. So I should say that if this is a structure, if 4 is structure, and all that the structure is held by one person is going to take you to a tower moment. The change ratio is 3-to-1 because 3 is a catalyst for change and 1 is a leadership. So the 1 is always going to tell you, it's going to direct things. So if the 3 is moving, 3 is always going to lead to, it's a catalyst for movement. And a 3-to-1 ratio is always going to keep you in a state of change. It's not a place that will, it doesn't last, even though it's not structural. But if you want to promote growth, keeping things in this ratio for as long as possible is actually a fairly decent way to get a lot of growth out of a situation very quickly. But the most balanced thing you can possibly do is keep things in a balanced state where it's 4 in Earth, so you've got stability. It's It's stable in structure, stable in the physical world. And then you've got a stability, a reliance on the structure of spirit as well. And what that leads to is, 4 and 4. So you've got the figure 8. So and 8 is for eternity. It's for flow. You've got a structure in the top. You've got a structure in the bottom. You have 2 for partnership. You've got 2 repeated. So it's nice and balanced. It's partner, partner. And it's a partnership between spirit and earth. So that's that. Also, well, I'll talk about that later. Okay. So I'm going to talk about that later too. I was going to talk about, where's my tissue? One second. Whoops. All right. Yeah. So I've got a couple of issues to talk about. I wanted to talk about templates, but I think before I do that, I'm going to address the, so it's so interesting. When I have private sessions, the thing that always stands out to me is that there are these themes that come up. They always come into my awareness at the same time. And what that tells me, since I only ever deal with, all the individuals are they're like figures that are kind of like the cog for a group. So whatever adjustment, whatever comes up for the people who I speak to privately, that's what's happening for the entire group. So when there's, especially when there's more than one. So like any of you who are readers or something, and like tarot card readers, there tend to be these clusters of issues that crop up. Like I remember a couple of months ago, I had like a whole cluster of like orphans that showed up. Like every issue had to do with being an orphan or parent-child separation or loss of parents, children being abandoned, things like that. And lately, what's come up about 6 times now. So it's like it's a big issue. It's coming to me from a number of different places. It means that this issue is being faced by a lot of people right at this juncture. And that is the issue of, and I also know that it has to do with me too, because I know that we just finished, brought the Joan of Arc template to a close. That there's a clear template that we're going to reestablish with different players. None of the dark ones are coming. We're going to use the same model with different beings at the points, so that when we rebalance it, it's going to actually work, because we're not going to have the sabotage. That's nice. But we're just at this precipice of full transparency. The issues of coming out to friends and family, huge right now. There's this sense of, I'm not going to be able to keep this hidden much longer. And that's true. It's true for everybody. It's not just true for you. It's true for everyone. We've reached a place of disclosure in the public, like global disclosure. It's going to affect every possible area. There's not going, the news is going to spread. Whatever the news is, it's going to spread real fast. There's no place else to hide, nor do we, well, those of us who are interested in things being light, it's so interesting. This is such an interesting, it's an interesting place to be altogether, because remember where I said that you can't just have, in the interest of fairness and equality, you can't just have the dark side change. I want the dark side to come clean. I want to have some disclosure. I want to have, you know, all the public I want to know about the black ops and the government. And here's the thing. There is an equal amount of fear held by light workers who don't want to come out to their friends and family. And it is amazing to me the number of people that I talk to who have this exact issue, where it's like they want a victory for the light, but they themselves are carrying a lot of fear. And what if I don't want my working people who follow me on Facebook, I don't want them to know what I really think. But here's the thing, you can't have, it is actually a rule that you can't ask someone to do something that you yourself are unwilling or unable to do. You can't insist, that would be slavery. Insist that someone else do something that you yourself are unwilling to do or have not done. If we want full transparency from the other side, from the dark side, we absolutely need to be fully transparent ourselves. It's part of an equality of ascension. The ascension process requires everyone to step up to their next best level, their next highest level of service. So you can't just say that somebody else has to do the lifting. This has been part of the problem. Everyone has to lift their own heaviest shit. They have to get rid of whatever the burden is that you're carrying that says, you know, I'm afraid because what will other people think? Or I'm afraid of the consequences. You can't have just everybody else get rid of their fear. You absolutely do have to be the change that you want to see in the world. You have to come out as whatever it is that you're afraid that somebody's going to see. The most important thing to be at this time is authentic and brave. And that's really what we need. The way to lift the planet up in vibration and be fearless is to start by going into the place that you're scared of and being fully transparent anyway. And I'm not telling you to do something that I haven't done, because I learned that I had been Joan of Arc and I was called crazy and my kids were taken away and they said that I was delusional, and I got my one daughter back, but I was put on trial in this lifetime. Sometimes you just have, and I knew at the time when it happened that I was there. It wasn't about the issue of the lawsuit. It wasn't even about the custody of my children. It was about learning to stabilize my vibration, because I had post-traumatic stress like I can't even tell you, having to, regarding a trial. And if you know anything about the Joan of Arc story, that pushed, and it went on and on and on and on and on. That pushed every trigger I had in that trial. And then every time I thought it was over, it's like, no, we're taking you back to court for something else. And I knew that if I decided to, it would have been easier on me when the psychological examiner said, so you think you're Joan of Arc? It would have been, and everybody that I spoke to said, well, just don't, you don't have to tell her that. It's not important. But I knew that it was, because I actually was Joan of Arc. And I know that I'm not going to go into a courtroom and lie and sanction that with my own vibrational frequency that endorses that. That's going to be a compounding of the problem. It's not going to even solve my problem, because I'm only going to come back until I resolve the issue that says the court is more important, that it, has more power or more authority over truth than I do. If I know something is true, then I'm going to say, yeah, I know it was true. And I knew that at the time that the primary motivation, the primary reason I was actually there on a soul level was to stabilize my own conviction and stop wavering when they say what is true. Because that was the mistake that I made in the Joan of Arc lifetime, was that they had threatened me with further torture. They showed me the fire, they showed me all the implements of torture, and they said, sign this paper, and if you do, we'll let you go home. And I had wavered. I didn't waver from my own conviction, but I allowed them to get the better of me. And in that moment, even though I made that little sign that said I don't really mean it, in that moment, I went out of my own integrity and I betrayed myself. I set the seed for self-betrayal that then turned into, basically darkness says, where can we get her? And I was carrying a lot of guilt about that too. So I knew that when they took me to court in this lifetime, it was really a matter of surmounting my own terror, my own big, fat, deeply embedded issues that I never wanted to look at. I would have been much happier to just focus and go build a new life for myself and forget that I was ever married to that jackass and just go have a peaceful life. That's really all I wanted. But honestly, there was the amount of crap that was vibrationally between me and that high standard. I still want the high standard, but you absolutely cannot take your crap with you. So you really do have to make a choice. Do you want to, how much do you want this standard? I really did want a standard. I also want a range, because I don't insist that everyone be, do the same things I do, but I also know that I'm not willing to have it any other way. My standard does allow for other people to have what they want, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to allow myself to be compromised. And I just am convinced that the world could be a lot better than it is. But anyway, where was I going with this? So the template is it's basically been wiped. If any of you have watched Legion, all of Legion was about the old template, the old model that allowed for, it was basically the war over light and dark within the Star of David, the Joan of Arc template. And it was all about bringing resolution to all of those beings. Very, very confusing show, extremely dark imagery. However, at the end of season 3, the last episode, they basically have wiped they basically get to start over, is essentially what happens. So yeah, that's where we are now. We're using the same model, but now that all of the darkest aspects are taken out, we're going to have use the same structure. Very similar to Earth. Like we're using the same structure, but we've taken all of the darkest aspects out of it. It's kind of like you don't have to, even though many of us would prefer to have no church, no educational system, we're going to keep this, maintain the structures, but basically we have to scour them out with a cosmic water pick, and you're going to run them through the autoclave. They're going to be sterilized, totally purified. And on the other side of that, we're going to begin to reformat, repopulate them. There's going to be a lot of walk-ins, and it's going to be a much higher vibrational place. And that way we're maintaining the body, but we're also getting the regeneration. So that's where we are now. So I want to talk about templates. So a template is basically a pattern. If you, where's my, hang on a minute. A template is basically, it's basically a pattern. There are individual templates, there are group templates that are what kind of society is based on. So when you come down into a physical vessel, it's basically like carry-on baggage. You can only fit, you're allowed to bring so much. You don't have access to all of your parts because you're in a physical body. And even the physical bodies that we're going into, they're capable of carrying far more light, so we're going to get a much larger template. But we still don't have, it's limited by the amount that your physical form, once it solidifies, it only moves so much, it can only carry so much. So just for the time being, I'm going to speak as though we're still in carbon-based, third-dimensional bodies. And then I'll describe it and we'll switch to what happens in a light body. At any rate, let's just say that, that this is the amount that you can carry into a physical vessel. It's kind of like, it's like this. So you go into a physical vessel and you can carry maybe X amount. And so what you do before you come in is, let's pretend this is fiber optics. You've got all these light strands, and what you get to do, because your first creation is yourself, so you get to invent yourself, you're not always going down with a completely clean slate because there's reincarnation. So every time you get a new body, you have a certain amount of biological DNA. You're going to start off with this. Then you've got your energetic influences from your other incarnations. So you're basically going to, when you leave a body, let's say there's like a membrane, and you leave your body, and it's kind of like you drop, when you come back in, you come in kind of the same way that you went out, energetically speaking. You wind up picking up your spiritual skin that you had before. It's kind of like you come back in through the same energy body. You have a different physical body, but you come in carrying a lot of the same energy. So if this is your new biological DNA, and let's give it a little bit more than that. Let's say that this is all your old history too, your new biological DNA and your own history. So now you've only got so much more that you can add. So usually you'll say, and again, these are like different amounts. Like let's say they're all strands of light, and light is data. Then what you would do is you would say something like, well, here's all of my available options, things that I could pick. We've got all of these archetypes, and I could choose to have some experience from somebody else. Like I'll take some that's from Isis, and I'll take some that's from, I don't know, name another one. I'll take some from Eve. I'll take some from whoever. I'll get some from Thor. And pretty soon you've got yourself a nice bundle. So what happens, and then usually people will go along for a while and they'll be choosing over many incarnations to have characteristics. Oh, I should have said like Mary Magdalene. Let's say we add some Mary Magdalene, because there's a lot of Mary Magdalenes. We'll take some from the Jesus template. So you're kind of adding some of your favorite ingredients to yourself, because you're trying to embody as much of this as possible. Get your frequency high, make sure you learn all your lessons. But here's the thing, you have to be able to carry the higher frequencies too. You can't just as an incoming soul. You can't just say, well, I'm going to jump to 1000% Jesus energy, because you'd try and you wouldn't have any idea how to manage that at all. So if these are your options for a while, over time, what have you done there? You busted my light. Wait a minute. Hang on a second. Oh, you unplugged it. Just a minute. Hang on a second. You back on? No. Come on, Lucas. Nope, I lost my light. Can you? No, you can't see me at all, can you? Oh, no, there it is. Got it back. You stay there. So what happens over time, get my spaghetti back. So over time, every time humanity is ready en masse for something new to be introduced, let's say these have been the old templates for a really long time, people have been choosing from this section of the library for a long time, and humanity is ready for something new. What will happen is they will send down to Earth another being with the new codes, the new frequencies, basically the new pattern. And anyone who has sufficiently learned, if you've learned this stuff, you'll take this stuff in a ratio. That's all this is. It's just like a ratio of certain colors. And every person makes their own recipe. So then they're going to introduce something else. Like they're going to send down a Joan of Arc who has like all new frequencies. We've never used these things before. It's a totally new pattern. And let's say that they're stars instead. And it's something that's very eye-catching because nobody's ever seen anything like it before. They're like, wow, where do you get one of those? That's amazing. And pretty soon, and so it's offered. So that's what it's offered as new codes that and we encourage this very strongly, where the idea is you create a kind of celebrity, you get everyone to focus their attention on them for long periods of time, and it starts a two-way energy pathway. And the more you pray to that person, or the more you idolize that person, the stronger that bond becomes. You're running more and more energy. You're deriving the benefit of their codes because it's a two-way system. And they're also taking a certain amount of your old energy and helping to transmute it on behalf of you. That's like one of the ways that saints work. If you pray to a saint, do you actually get help from that person? Yeah, that being, you do. There's a way that works. So then you could say, if this is the person, let's say they have a really strong bond with Joan of Arc, and they're in the army and they're paying a lot of attention, they're seeing all the movies, etc. They want to pick up some more of a lot of that. And as a result, their vibrational frequency goes up much higher. Also, I should say that some strands are stronger and brighter than others. Also, it's not a perfect analogy, because really what it is, not all the strands are the same length. You can have some that are very long, you could have some that are relatively short, and the way this creates your own particular energetic signature is more like this. So your particular energetic signature is not going to match anybody else's. You've also got your Akashic records, etc. So all of the energy that passes through you is going to carry your unique frequency based on your recipe over millennia that you invented. Your first creation is yourself, and that bears your signature. So that's why there's no escaping karma. You're going to get met by yourself. You're going to go back and be yourself every single time. So you can sometimes delay your karma. And like, for example, if you did something when you were, it's like anything else, you're not really held responsible for certain things when you're really a spiritual baby, but doesn't mean you don't have to pay it. Learn later. You're going to have to learn later. You don't always have instant karma until you're a spiritually mature adult who should know better. And that way, if you hurt somebody, you get the same thing back almost immediately. But spiritual babies often make horrible mistakes, and they still have to clean up their own mess, same way anybody does. But they're not going to do that. They're not going to meet the most extreme things they've ever done. They're not going to meet that again until it would be productive for them to meet their karma. Because karma is not about suffering, it's about learning. So if you're someplace where, if you make an egregious error of judgment when you're spiritually stupid, you'll get met with that, but not until you are mature enough to catch the lesson. Otherwise, it would just be feeding pointless suffering. So, where'd my glasses go? So let's say this is this is the Joan of Arc model that is now being retired, because they do actually retire certain things after they've been, just like we retired this one, or these, mostly. Nobody's really using some of the older ones. They've basically been picked up and sufficiently. So it's not like you can't go back and you can take the good qualities from a particular icon. You can, but the really only the good qualities. The portion of the Joan of Arc template that's being retired is the part that enforced hyperpolarity. It was a very warring template to begin with, because it had to be at the time. The first job in getting darkness off the planet was to get the darkness into a location so we can boot it out. You have to separate the wheat from the chaff, and then you take out the darkness. So then what happens after we've got this new Joan of Arc template, and anybody who's incarnating has the option of partaking of some aspect of this new invention. So a template is like, it's like there was a time when there was a first chocolate chip cookie, and somebody invented that. You know, there's that Toll House story. And then it was so popular so quickly that now almost everybody has made, it's basically the same recipe. You're making a chocolate chip cookie, but now everybody knows what a chocolate chip cookie is, and there's tons of different varieties. You can tweak it, you can make adjustments to your own recipe, but it's still, you're taking it and you're going off and riffing on it. That's basically what a template is. It's kind of a set of new suggestions, like, look, this is a new invention, and anybody who wants to take some of it up, new ingredients or a new model, that's basically what Joan of Arc was. It's like, hey, there's this new thing. It's called Women Wear Pants, and women are equal, and we can go in battle. We can go into battle too. Female warrior, ta-da, we'll plop you right down. Child star. Basically, you can take some of that if you want.